Welcome back to the Explainer. So, if you've ever spent any time digging into ancient apocalyptic texts, you already know they can feel, well, kind of like a bizarre puzzle, right? They're this wild mix of vivid, almost hallucinatory symbols that seem practically impossible to untangle. But today, we're zooming in on a really fascinating sequence from Revelation 14, specifically verses 14 through 16. We are going to break down exactly how early Christian thinkers completely deconstructed this text. Okay, let's dive into this and start pulling these ancient symbols apart piece by piece, almost like a detective story.
So here is our anchor text for today. One like a son of man, seated on a cloud, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. I mean, it is incredibly vivid imagery. But you have to remember, to the early church commentators, this absolutely wasn't just a dramatic picture. To them, every single noun, every adjective in that sentence carried a dense, hidden theological weight that they were just eager to unpack.
And this brilliantly illustrates our roadmap for cracking this ancient puzzle. We'll start with a vision of the end, then we'll decode the white cloud, the golden crown, the sharp sickle, and finally wrap up with the final harvest. Okay, number 1, a vision of the end. Now, to truly grasp what we're looking at here, we have to get inside the mindset of these early commentators, thinkers like Oecumenius and Andrew of Caesarea. They didn't read this text literally at all. They definitely weren't picturing some physical, literal agricultural event. Instead, they saw every single element on the page as a profound theological metaphor pointing toward one very specific cosmic event.
And that event is the consummation. You're going to see this piece of ancient theological jargon come up a lot in our sources. Oecumenius and Andrew of Caesarea explicitly tell us that the sickle and the harvest signify the consummation of the age. Basically, it's the ultimate end of the world, the grand finale, the final completion of the divine plan. So keep that in mind, because everything we are about to look at is framed entirely by this concept of an ultimate, final resolution.
Moving to number 2, decoding the white cloud. So, the figure in the vision is seated on a white cloud. But why a white cloud? Well, let's look at how the ancient minds tackled this one. We actually see some wildly fascinating interpretations here. Oecumenius suggests the cloud represents angelic powers because of their exalted nature. Or, in a pretty radical twist, he says it represents the Virgin Mary. He actually cites an earlier thinker, Aquila, who called Mary light material. It's a cool concept. She was material because she was made of human flesh, but light because of her extreme purity, totally unweighed down by sin. Now, on the other hand, Promatius sees the cloud as representing the incarnation of Christ himself, or the body of the church. And he adds this beautiful poetic detail, saying the church is a white cloud because it was made white after the fires of persecution were cooled, almost as if with snow. But then we have the commentator Belead, who offers a really striking, almost paradoxical interpretation. He says that when Christ comes for judgment, he actually uses the cloud of his human flesh to intentionally mask his blinding divinity. Why would he do that? Well, so that the wicked are actually able to physically behold the one who is judging them. So in this view, the cloud isn't just a mode of transport, right? It's a necessary veil.
All right, number 3, the golden crown. The imagery shifts here from the purity of the cloud to the object on the figure's head. The focus pivots entirely to authority.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the different commentators completely fracture this single symbol of the golden crown into multiple meanings all at the exact same time. Andrew of Caesarea notes that since gold represents great value among humans, it naturally symbolizes Christ's governance over both visible and invisible powers. Promatius, though, he zooms right in on the crown itself, interpreting it as the 24 elders, or more specifically, the 12 apostles whose preaching acquired the faith. And then Bede synthesizes the whole visual, simply stating it signifies the ultimate victory of the king. So it's this incredibly multi-layered symbol representing cosmic governance, the foundation of the apostles, and absolute victory, all bundled into one.
Number 4, the sharp sickle. Okay, so we have the figure, the transport, and the crown of authority. But now the imagery shifts from royal description to impending action. The sickle in the hand.
I mean, it's a pretty jarring shift, isn't it? You go from looking at this majestic, kingly figure to suddenly staring at a sharp blade. So what actually happens when this sickle is swung? Again, remember, these ancient scholars are reading this entirely as a metaphor. This absolutely is not about agriculture. The sickle is a tool of consequence. Bede provides a frankly chilling warning here. He writes that the sharp sickle refers to the judicial sentence of separation, and he heavily emphasizes that we can in no way avoid this judgment. He says, and I quote, "Whatever is felled by a sickle falls within." Pramasius builds on this, noting that this sentence is a divine judgment deployed specifically for the defense of the church. So the sickle isn't just a prop. It's the ultimate tool of divine, inescapable justice. Which brings us to number 5, the final harvest. The swinging of that sickle triggers the absolute climax of this entire apocalyptic vision, the final harvest of the earth.
So the crucial point is exactly what is being harvested, or rather, what is being separated. According to Primatius, Caesarius of Arles, and Oecumenius, the harvest is a massive, great division. When the church receives its judicial power at the end of the world, a hard line is drawn. It's the ultimate separation of the pious from the impious. Caesarius specifically notes the separation of Catholics from heretics and saints from sinners. And Oecumenius points out that just like a real harvest, the good wheat is gathered, but the chaff, the impurities among humankind, is left behind, destined to be given over to the fire.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an incredibly beautiful conclusion by Andrew of Caesarea. He points out that the cry for this harvest is actually the supplication of all the heavenly powers. Literally, the angels are praying for this moment to arrive. Why? Because at the harvest, that which is changeable and transient will finally cease to exist, and in its place, that which is immovable and enduring will be manifested. The ripe wheat is finally ready for the heavenly granaries. So the harvest isn't just an end, it's the final securing of what is actually permanent. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really think about how these ancient commentators viewed this apocalyptic text, not just as some distant future event, but as a real lens for ultimate reality. If the sickle separates what burns away from what lasts forever, when that final harvest comes, what in your life is merely transient chaff, and what is immovable, enduring meat? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the text.